How's it going, folks? My name is Joseph Flores. I'm the program director of the LA Metropolitan Debate League, and this is the first training session for the 2020 Financial Literacy Debates. It's a little bit different from what you might be used to in our usual policy debates, but I assure you that the topics that you learn about are going to be essential life lessons that you take with you into the real world, into college, and beyond. At this point, you should have already completed the pre-assessment. If you haven't, I put the link in the description so you could do that now before watching the rest of this video. This training session will help you understand core concepts in financial literacy and prepare your cases in order to be competitively successful in this tournament. To get the most out of watching this video, I suggest you take notes throughout and don't be afraid to pause or replay some parts. There will be points through this video where I will ask you to pause the video and think through some of the answers yourself as a self-guided exercise. As you're going through these sessions, you may come across things that aren't very clear to you or that you need some help understanding. In those kinds of scenarios, don't be afraid to reach out to us. Later in this presentation, I'll show you how to do that. But for now, let's get started. Welcome to the first training session for the Financial Literacy Debates. Here's an outline of what we will be doing over the next few weeks to get you prepared for the tournament. This video will serve as the first financial education seminar. After today, you should begin preparing your cases, practicing your speeches, working with your teams, and working with the Lambdal staff in order to make sure that you have the best case possible. This Thursday, I will be releasing the second financial education seminar where we'll go more in depth on the particular formats and how the debate will be evaluated. The first drafts of your case will be due on January 26th via Google Drive. You'll turn them in by uploading them to a Google Drive folder located at finlit.lambdal.org. In order to upload to this folder, you will need to request permission. Make sure you include your name and school in the request form. Once those are all turned in, our third session will be on January 27th. On January 30th, we'll check your cases again, as well as your rebuttals. After that, in the week leading up to the tournament, we'll have practice debates to help you put those cases in action before the actual tournament. The Financial Literacy Debate Tournament will take place on February 6th. Unlike our other tournaments, this will be a one-day tournament only. The top two teams from the tournament will advance to a final round on Thursday, February 11th. So what is the purpose of this tournament? Why are we going to spend this month learning about financial literacy? Financial literacy is crucial as it equips you with the knowledge and tools needed to make strong, informed decisions. Without it, the financial decisions we do make or don't make can potentially threaten your financial security in the long run. Being financially literate isn't as common sense as you may think. Did you know 1 in 5 households spend more money every month than they actually make in income? This means that 20% of the population is going more and more in debt every month. And as we'll learn, it only becomes harder to get out of that hole the more you do it. Also, less than 1 in 3 Americans actually make a monthly budget. It's quite shocking, but in reality, most people do these things. So, once we learn about that, what is actually being debated this year? Well, this year, the topic will be centered around a choice that you are going to be facing soon. If a student has sole responsibility for the cost of their college education, is it a better financial decision to begin their college education at a 2-year college or begin their college education at a 4-year college? Before we move on, let's take a moment to reflect on the topic and think about the potential debates that you'll be setting yourself up for from this resolution. Are there any words that seem unfamiliar that need to be defined? Also consider what words in this resolution are going to be the center points of clash. Which words are critical for clash, and which parts are going to be the focus of the debate? At this moment, I'm going to ask everyone to pause the video for a moment and try to come up with at least 3 places where the debate will clash over. Welcome back. So what terms did you need to take a moment to define, and what terms do you think are going to be the most important for clashing in this debate? The first term that probably jumps to mind is sole responsibility. This means that the student is in a situation that a lot of people are in. They have no money set aside and are most likely going to need to take out loans to be able to cover the costs of college. But what other situations do you think this person might face? Are they working off campus? Are they living at home? What other situations do people consider when entering college? These are going to be important for understanding the responsibilities held by these individuals. Second, the decision of this debate is a financial one. While there are social elements and other things like that, those are all secondary in this debate. It's your job to determine what is the best financial decision. There's a lot of things here to consider, but at the end of the day, always remember that whatever contentions and points you come up with should always tie back to a financial decision. To help get you brainstorming, I suggest you make a chart like this one in your notes. Can you come up with a few benefits for each side? What are some benefits to each side, whether you go the 2-year path or the 4-year path? Here are a few benefits that we came up with earlier. At a 2-year, you get your associate's degree much quicker than you would an undergraduate. For a lot of people, they don't have to pay for room and board because they live at home or at least close to home. Might be easier to balance your jobs and classes, or it just feels like an easier transition from high school through college. Inversely, there's benefits to a 4-year as well. There might be issues with classes that don't transfer. Generally speaking, there's higher graduation rates coming out of 4 years. You can network with people that might lead to jobs later. There tends to be more advantages at a 4-year. I'm sure you came up with plenty of other ideas on your own, and I encourage you to write those out. Just always remember that for this tournament, whatever advantages you come up with for either side of the debate should always lead back to the financial impact of it. So, for example, one of the ones I have listed here is creating personal connections. This isn't inherently a financial impact, but it could be extrapolated to one. For example, you could use the connections you have to get a job or internship that helps you earn more money in the long term. As you can see, there's benefits to both sides, and there's plenty of places that this debate will clash. Next, I want to go over the student guide that you will have access to. This will help you write your cases, define terms, and practice your speeches. As a reminder, this tournament does not follow a policy debate format. If you haven't already received the guide, it will be available in the Google Drive folder at finlit.lambda.org. Let's preview what's in your guide. First, it contains how the debate will be structured, so this means speech times and speech orders. It contains how the debates will be judged, so this is the metrics that you're being evaluated on. It has steps for how your case should be built, so a helpful outline and structure. It has sample contentions for each side of the debate. It contains sample contentions for each side of the debate. While you will be allowed to do your own research and bring in your own sources, there's plenty in the packet already to work with. For those of you that want to go further, there's additional research links and articles that you could read to make arguments from. Finally, there's a sample ballot so you can see exactly how you'll be evaluated by the judges at the tournament. The packet starts with an introduction, simply introducing what the topic is and its importance. It looks a bit small here, but the page after that goes over the format, the times for each speech, and who's giving each speech. After that, there's a couple worksheets that you could fill out on your own to define key terms, where you could write in the definition yourself. Personally, I find it really helpful to do things like that. Even if I could read the definition, something about writing it in helps me remember it better. And I'm sure you all have experience with that in your classes. If you're not sure of the definition to some of these terms, don't worry. Part of it will be gone over during the sessions that we have, and other parts of it will be available throughout the packet. The student guide also features the guidelines that I mentioned earlier for specific things that you should do and not do during the tournament, as well as some example contentions for both sides of the debate. First for the 2-year college, as well as the 4-year university. Either your coaches have already distributed this guide to you, or you'll be able to download it from the Google Drive. Either way, you should take some time and read through it yourself before moving on to the next session. With that, let's jump into some core concepts that you'll be dealing with. Loans. So how do lenders determine if you're eligible for a loan? Well, the biggest factor is your credit score. Some of you probably already know that, but I want to take it to the next step. What is your credit score and how does it get scored? Well, there's 3 different companies that calculate what's called your FICO score. Your credit score is a numerical expression based on a level of analysis of a person's credit files to represent the credit worthiness of an individual. Lenders use credit scores to determine who qualifies for a loan, at what interest rate, and what limits. On this chart, you could see what actually determines your score. 35% is based on your payment history. 30% is based on the amounts that you owe. 15% is based on the length of your credit history. 10% is based on how mixed your credit is. And the last 10% is based on new credits. So as young adults, what does your score look like? Most likely, it's probably low, simply because a huge chunk of this chart isn't yet established. Your payment history and the length of your credit history. Generally speaking, loans go to people that fall in the good, very good, or exceptional range on the chart above my head. Even with a good score, you're not always getting the best deal on the loan. So the goal is always to get into the very good or exceptional range. But this percentage breakdown is based on actual Americans. So 16% of Americans have a very poor score, 18% a fair score, 21% a good score, 25% a very good score, and the top 20% have an exceptional score. 16% of people have a very poor score, which makes it difficult to get loans. So if you're a young person and you have no credit history, that means you probably have a low credit score. So how do you get student loans? One way is by having a cosigner. In order to understand the core parts of how loans work, though, you need to understand these 3 points. The way loans work, there are generally 3 parties involved: the lender, the borrower, and the cosigner. The lender is the institution that's actually letting you borrow the money. Generally speaking, it'll be the bank. So the bank has their pile of money, and you want to borrow it from them. That makes you the borrower. In other words, a person or organization that takes out a loan from a bank under agreement to pay it back later, typically with interest. So in the case of the debates that you'll be preparing for, it's the student with the sole responsibility to pay for college. It's unlikely the bank will want to give them a loan because of this credit score. Your credit history is your risk. It's unlikely that they'll give it to you if you have a low score. This is why it's likely if you go to a bank for a loan that you will need a cosigner. The cosigner is someone with a higher score that backs up your responsibility. Basically, if the borrower can't pay back the loan, it becomes a responsibility of the cosigner. That's why it's very important that if you take out a loan with the cosigner, that you pay it back, because if you don't, it becomes that cosigner's responsibility. I've been on both sides of this, both as the borrower that needed a cosigner and now in my older life, having co-signed for other people. It's important that you think through the impact of this kind of loan. It's a tough choice to get a cosigner because it also impacts that person's credit score, not just your own. But generally, if you are new to the market and have a low credit score, this is one way to secure a loan easier or at a better rate. Remember, if the borrower does not pay back this loan, the cosigner becomes responsible for it, interest included. So is debt normal? Well, most households in America have some sort of debt. Here's a chart breaking down how much the average is. The average U.S. household has about $16,000 in credit card debt, $30,000 in auto loans debt, $50,000 in student loan debt, and $182,000 in mortgages, or the kind of debt you take on in order to buy a house. So why do we go into debt? Why can't we save up this money and buy it outright? Well, generally, a lot of people prefer taking out the loan and being able to use it instead of saving up the money up front and choosing to pay for the interest on that loan. If you really need a new car this year in order to get to work, it's not really feasible to save up money because you need the car to go to work. This is why you would take out a loan to pay for the car, use the car to go to work, and then use the money that you earn from work to start to pay back down the debt. So far, we've gone over one type of loan, a bank loan, where you and a cosigner would go to a bank and get a loan that way. But there's a better way for students. If you're eligible, you should take out a federal loan. The scenario that we described earlier with the cosigner and the bank is a private loan. These are student loans from a private bank that do not follow strict federal guidelines and do not require FAFSA. The other type of loan that I want to talk about is a federal loan. A federal loan is a student loan sponsored and regulated by the federal government and offers repayment assistance, but it requires you to be eligible for FAFSA. There are 2 types of federal loans. The first type of federal loan is a subsidized loan. These require students to demonstrate financial need. With the subsidized loan, the federal government pays interest that accrues while the student is enrolled in school at least half time, during the 6-month grace period after the student leaves school, and during loan deferment. The second type of federal loan is an unsubsidized loan. These do not require the student to demonstrate financial need, but for these, the interest begins to accrue while you're in school. For an unsubsidized loan, interest begins to accrue immediately. In other words, when you take out the loan and you're still in school, interest begins to grow. The other type of federal loan is an unsubsidized loan. These do not require students to demonstrate financial need, but they begin to accrue interest immediately or while you're still in school. Subsidized loans are best, but there's a limit to how much the government will be willing to offer you on those. With federal loans, it's functionally the government being your cosigner instead of another adult. So now that you have this loan, whether it's for a car, a house, or college, it's important to learn about interest. Borrowing money costs money, and the higher your interest rate, the more you're going to end up paying in the long term, and the longer it's going to take for you to pay it back. Let's use this as an example. You take out a $25,000 loan. This is what we call your principal. The principal is the amount of money originally borrowed. The interest rate on this example is 8%. The interest is the amount paid to be able to use someone else's money, a percentage of the principal. So in this case, it would be 8% of $25,000 that you would owe on top of that $25,000. With this loan, you have 10 years to pay back all $25,000. Over the course of those 10 years, you pay about $303 every month. By the end of this 10-year cycle, you'll have paid $11,398 in interest alone. That's not even touching the principal $25,000 that you owe from the beginning. That's just the interest on top of the loan, on top of the principal. By the end of the loan, you have paid over $11,000 in interest alone. That's not going towards the principal $25,000. You owe that too. By the end of the loan, you will have paid back the full amount of the principal plus the full interest, or $36,398. What started as a $25,000 loan ended up costing you $36,398. This is why you want to keep your debts low. Sometimes with school loans, you'll be offered more than you need. As a word of warning, you should only take out the amount that you need, because you'll continue to pay interest on it even if you don't need it. So it'll cost you more than you're actually getting out of it. Let's talk specifically about student loan interest rates. In the scenario we just spoke about, the interest rate was 8%. This chart breaks down the percentages for student loan interest over the last few years. On average, a subsidized loan will have between 3 and 5%. Right now, interest rates are pretty low because of the pandemic. That's not reflected on this chart yet, but this is an average from the last few years. The interest rate is based on the economy and the Federal Reserve and the rates that it's giving. So as the economy fluctuates, so does the percentage of interest that you pay. So you're taking these loans out to pay for college, but what exactly are you paying for? In this next section, I'm going to break down the costs of college. Tuition isn't the only thing that you pay for when you're in college. This chart breaks down a few of the other things that you need to consider paying. Let's look at this chart. There's two types of costs: direct costs, which are things that you pay directly to the school, and indirect costs, that are things associated with being able to attend college. Direct costs include the tuition, but also standard fees for things on campus, as well as your room and board, or where you're going to live and what you're going to eat. There's also indirect costs. So these are things like your books, personal expenses, transportation costs, living allowance. Tuition is just one part of the cost of going to college. So make sure that you keep that in mind as you're starting to put your cases together. How do these different direct costs and indirect costs vary between a 2-year school and a 4-year school? To help cover those college costs, what you get is an aid package. Those federal loans that we spoke about earlier are one part of the package, but it also includes things like scholarships or grants. It's important that when you're applying to college that you complete FAFSA, but not only when you're applying, but every year while you're in college as well. When you complete FAFSA, you submit information about your income, tax documents, and things like that. And with that, they determine how much aid you're eligible for. If you have a greater need, it's less likely that your aid package will include loans and more likely that it'll include grants. Next, you should take some time to review the core financial terms. Next, you should review some of these key financial terms. A link to a video that Noddle produced will help go over these. So that'll pretty much do it for the first financial education seminar. Up next, later this week, we'll be releasing the second financial education seminar. And just remember that your case drafts are due on January 26th at the finlit.lambda.org Google Drive. So what do you need to do between now and the next seminar? Well, first, you should read through the entire student guide. Make sure you check out the resources that are in there and use it to help start creating your case. There's enough information in there to debate with, but if you want to, you could do your own research on top of it. Second, you want to decide between you and your partner who will be in charge of designing the 2-year plan case and who will be in charge of designing the 4-year plan case. We highly suggest that you split these off, that one person writes one and the other person writes the other. Third, for both cases, compile a list of contentions that will support that side. The guide suggests some, but there's definitely others beyond what's in the packet. Finally, you should begin outlining how to support these contentions with evidence and other sources. If you need any help with this, feel free to reach out to us on the Lambda Discord. If you're not already a part of it, your coach could send you an invitation link. Second, make sure that you upload your docs into Google Drive when you're done with them before January 26th. And third, remember that this is about a personal financial decision. The impacts that you come up with should be about how it affects an individual person that has that sole responsibility. Keep an eye out for session 2 that will be available later this week. I hope the session was helpful and gave you an idea of the importance of understanding interest and loans. It will be an important part of how you structure your case and the decision between taking out loans to a 4-year or a 2-year and the costs associated with those. In the next session, we'll be going over the differences between that 2-year route and that 4-year route. Until then, good luck, and if you need any help, reach out to us on the Discord. Peace.